This review is of John Connolly's The Book of Lost Things. He's the New York Times best-selling author of The Black Angel, and he lives in Dublin, Ireland. He's also written, let's see, where was that? Every Dead Thing, Dark Hollow, The Killing Kind, The White Road, Bad Men, Nocturnes. So he's a regular contributor to the Irish Times as well. I've never really heard of this guy, but I got this book for my kids to read, and they haven't read it yet. Don't know if they will bother to read it or not. My son said he tried reading it and he was bored. So I'm going to say that, as with Stephen King's books that tend to start out slowly and calmly, this also starts out slowly and calmly. So if you are reading it and in the beginning you feel like, gosh, this is kind of blasé, well, that's the way some authors work. They start with something very slow, and then it builds pace throughout the book. And like a lot of other fantasy novels, this uses the classical format of the child becoming a man and becoming a hero kind of thing. Much like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and a lot of other, and Harry Potter, for those who are more contemporary than I am. This book starts out, I believe it is set in World War I England, and he and his parents live together, and his mother is dying of cancer, and he becomes such a nervous wreck about it that he develops a series of OCD behaviors that he feels that as long as he sticks to the routine, the cancer isn't going to kill her. Well, of course, it's like touching doorknobs, tapping on things repetitively, a certain number of times. It has to be an odd number, not an even number or something like that. And based on like very superstitious beliefs. And of course, it doesn't work. It doesn't save his mom. His mom, much like my wife, still dies of cancer. And I did a heck of a lot more than some OCD crap than he did to try and save my wife. Sorry, I'm digressing. If you have gone through something like that, you may find the beginning a bit hard to read through, but it's a very small part of the book overall. The World War I is raging, and they're fearful of the bombing. So the dad says they're going to send a lot of kids away to the countryside, and he said, "But I'm not going to let them separate us. You and I have got to stick together." Well, it turns out that his dad has fallen in love with, I think, a nurse from the palliative care facility where his mom had often stayed. And so, you know what? I should probably tell you that his name is David instead of saying his and stuff like that. Anyways, and so he fell in love. He got this woman, Rose, pregnant. So, 3 months later, they got married. And David was very bitter. And then when David's half-brother was born, Georgie, he was even more bitter. He was angry at Rose. He was angry at Georgie. His father told him that he was working in the cryptographic services of the UK, and that was very important, and he should never tell anybody that was what he was doing, and that it would require him to work long hours, but he was saving lives and helping to win the war. And that was, I think, something that was significant to David. Well, things just got worse because he spent more and more time away. I mean, the father. And things were really coming to a head, and it was becoming a very fractured household. David starts seeing a visitor from another world called the Crooked Man, and eventually he ends up in that world where the Crooked Man is trying to trick him into something. And at every step of the way, he has both someone who helps him and he has those who are trying to catch and kill him. So it gets interesting, I guess you could say, pretty quickly once he's in that alternate world and the way back is blocked. Because as soon as he gets through, and I won't give you all the details, but as soon as he gets through, he's basically like, well, I want to go back now. But at the same time, the reason he'd gone through the doorway, so to speak, is that he had heard his mother calling to him and asking him to save her. Now, she was already dead by that point, and he knew better, but he was grieving very strongly and desperately missed his mother, and since the situation with his father and his stepmother and half-brother was mostly because of him bad, he felt that he had to find his mother and save her. So yeah, so he goes through a series of adventures in which not only is he aided by other people, but he also proves that he's a brave boy and resourceful boy, and manages to overcome some very significant obstacles and do the right thing. And that's and it you come to, in the beginning I didn't like David because he was obviously very self-centered, but through the story it helped him to his experiences helped him to mature, and in the end, I mean, he does the right thing. I won't say more than that. I probably shouldn't have said that. Sorry, that was a spoiler. But he is given a lot of choices. He's given opportunities where he can betray his family. He can betray those who are helping him. And one of the things I really liked about this book was the backdrop, this fantasy world in which, and I won't tell you all the things about the fantasy world, but that he routinely learns about stories from that world, and he realizes, and I realize, and you'll realize, that these the fairy tales that are told to scare children, like Hansel and Gretel and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and Little Red Riding Hood and on and on and on and on, all are represented in this world, but the author has opted to change the stories, change who the protagonists are and who the antagonists are and what happens in the end. And I think it was a good choice to do that, because I feel like, if kids know about, probably more appropriate for a teen or an adult, but if somebody who's reading this is able to recognize all these old fairy tales inside of this book, they'll be like able to relate better, and they'll be surprised, and it'll force them to think about things a little bit differently, to observe that maybe the moral that was being taught in the original version wasn't as good as the version that John Connolly has put into it. So, yeah, long story short, it's an enjoyable, interesting book. By the time I got close to the end, I couldn't go to bed. I mean, I was way past my bedtime already for personal reasons, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to bed until I finish this, which was, not good, because I really need to have a regular schedule. But, at the same time, the end was very compelling, and I really wanted to find out what would happen, and it didn't let me down. So I won't say any more than that, because I've already said more than I probably should have. But I encourage you, if you are a teenager or an adult, especially an older teenager, to give it a try and wade past the more mundane beginning to get to the interesting part. I promise you, it gets interesting very fast once he travels into the other world. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Oh, and I'll give this an 8.